Amen. Amen. Thank you, Kyoko. And welcome. Welcome to the pews and welcome to the wall. Those of you who are on Zoom, we're glad to have you folks with us here in the sanctuary or wherever you're joining us from Zoom. We know that there are people honoring this day elsewhere as well, and that's great. Priscilla is one of them. So you're stuck with me for the day. I'm glad to be with you all. Wherever you are, we always remind ourselves that we're not the original stewards of this land. Here in Philadelphia, we're on land that was stewarded by the Lenni Lenape people, and we commit ourselves to caring for it as well. Our opening hymn, I would invite you to find either on the screen if you're watching Zoom, or the words are printed in your bulletin if you're here. And I invite you to stand in body or spirit as we sing together, "We Are." Amen. You may be seated. Our opening sentences are adapted from a poem called Promise. They're in the bulletin or on the screen. We'll read them responsively. This day is an open road stretching out before you. Step into your life as if it were a fast car. The air is soft as a well-washed shirt on your arms. Tomorrow the world will begin again, another fresh start. Amen. There are definitely plenty of dandelions glittering in my lawn. The sky was blue when I put the bulletin together. That was a few days ago. It's been a while, if you're not in Philadelphia. It's been a while since we've seen the sun. Our act of praise is a song that we've not sung much before, or perhaps at all. So at Kyoko's suggestion, I will have her play it through once, and then we can sing together "The Care the Eagle Gives Her Young," which is also printed in the bulletin. Amen. And I would, at this time, invite kids, I know we've got a few of them, if any would like to come to the stage with me, I would love to have you join me. Oh, phew, I'm not going to have to be here by myself. That's okay. I like to be by myself sometimes too, but how are you? How are you, Toby? Good. Thanks, Eli. We always start with the same question, which is there anything you'd like to tell us about that's been going on or anything coming up you want to talk about? Eli.
During the summer, I'm going to be going to England.
You're going to England in the summer.
I'm excited, then also not that excited because I have to do the longest drive. I think is about a 10-hour drive to an 8-hour drive.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
It's a long drive and
Yeah.
a long time on an airplane to get to England as well.
Yeah. I'm going probably the one castle that I'm looking forward to go to is England.
Okay.
No, not the Warwick.
Warwick. You're going to Warwick Castle.
Yep, and a
Very
couple
cool.
others.
Okay, so a castle tour. Thanks for telling us about that. I'm excited. Toby, anything you'd like to tell us about? No? Okay. Maisie, can you tell us about that little companion that's on your lap? Do you mind telling us about that?
At school, I'm making this thing. It's called animal research, and I'm researching a coral snake.
The coral snake. And you're learning about coral snakes, and so you've got one with you, but this one won't harm anyone in the sanctuary, right? Whew, I'm glad for that. Thanks for bringing it and for showing it to us. I wonder if you all can help me remember what's special about today. Is there anything special about today?
It's Mother's Day.
It's Mother's Day. Yes, something else that's special is we're going to have a special musical performance, but we'll hear that in a minute. But today is Mother's Day, and I can't make this microphone stay on my ear. Today is Mother's Day. Which are you doing anything? Are you celebrating anyone today?
Later, we're going to my grandma's house.
You're going to your grandma's house today to celebrate. That's cool, and I think I see someone you're probably celebrating today as well, sitting right out there in the pew. Maisie, who are you celebrating today?
Mom.
Your mom. All right. I celebrate your mom too. I'm glad she's here. And Marissa is celebrating by being at church on her own. Wow, this is a big Mother's Day gift for Marissa. You know, Mother's Day, it's kind of a cool day because we know a lot of cool moms, don't we? You want to say something?
This morning for Mother's Day, me and Maisie made Mom breakfast in bed.
You made her breakfast in bed. That is super sweet of you. Very nice gift. So Mother's Day is a good day because we know a lot of cool moms. I know a lot of cool moms. Mother's Day can also be kind of hard for people because sometimes there are people who wanted to be moms but can't be moms for any number of reasons, or sometimes people's moms have died, and so today makes them sad. Or sometimes moms have not been able to be with their kids, and that makes them sad. And sometimes moms just mess up. Your moms never mess up, do they? Do they ever mess up? Oh, your mom is admitting that she messes up. So sometimes moms mess up, so they're not perfect either. Today, you know what? Today is a day that we celebrate moms. We celebrate the good moms, the good things they do. But we also can remember people who have a harder time on today. So one thing that we do here sometimes, you might have noticed there are some flowers in the pews around. We like to make some time, and I'll invite the folks who are on Zoom. You can be part of this too by putting stuff in the chat or raising your hand, and Care can call out to you. But we'll start with you all today. You can maybe help us build a bouquet in the middle of the room there. You see there's a vase, so we'll find a couple of the flowers and bring them to the middle and see who we would like to honor. They might be our moms, or they might be grandmoms. They might be people who have a hard time being a mom. Anyone is invited to take part in this, but I'm going to ask you all to help me first. Can we come and see where we might find? We've got a lot of empty seats, so some of the flowers don't have people sitting on them already. Oh, actually, I hope that nobody's sitting on the flowers. But you know what? I'm gonna start. Yeah, and we'll leave some in the pews because other people might want to come out and say some. But I want to start. But so this can help us see what we're doing. I want to name. I noticed Priscilla is not here today because she and her husband Aaron and Priscilla's mom are all on a little vacation. In part because they're remembering Aaron's mom Lori, who died last year. So, Eli, can you put our first one in there, and we'll remember Lori. Does anybody want to honor a mom or someone who's important to you that you want to say their name out while we put a flower in? Your mom, okay. Your mom, all right. Well, we'll open this up. We've got a good start on our. Your Gaga. Okay, you want to put one in for her? Thank you. So we'll open this up, folks, and maybe you all can help me if there are people on Zoom who have names to say. You can help us put in flowers for them. So folks on Zoom, oh, this is disorienting. If I look at you, I'm showing you my back. Folks on Zoom, if you have names, you can put them in the chat. Folks here, you're welcome to come up with a flower to honor someone or to forgive someone or to grieve someone.
Kipp, Beth, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Beth Hawk would like to remember her grandmother Vivian, who is no longer with us.
Beth Hawk's grandmother, Vivian. Toby, can you put that in? Thank you so much. Marissa, you were going to...
Yeah, this is for my kid's biological mom.
For the kid's biological mom. Thank you. Do you want to say who it's for? You want Mom to say who it's for?
For my mother, Mary Jane.
For Mary Jane. Great. Thank you for bringing that.
Kipp, Seth Crick would like to honor Seth's mother, Debbie, and would also like to honor Eli and Maisie's mother, Laura.
Okay. Thank you. That was Seth's mom, your grandmom, and your mom. Do you wanna...
I would like to honor my mom, Cindy, and my grandmother, Jean.
Cindy and Jean, thank you.
This is for my mom, Melanie.
Thank you.
This is for my sister Linda and my sister Nancy, who both have suffered losses.
Linda and Nancy, thank you.
For my mom and for my grandmother.
This is for my grandmother that passed away last March and my mother who's back home in Maryland.
For mother and grandmother, thank you.
This is for my mom, Dot Southry, who was 97, alive and kicking and getting me back good for climbing out the window many years ago to meet my boyfriend.
And still making you dress up right for church.
Kipp, your dad says, since Kipp is busy, I will honor his mom, Charlotte.
Thank you. It's for my mom, thank you. Any others? Okay. This looks like a pretty good bouquet. Thank you all. Thank you for your help. That's okay. You can see where that fits. Thank you so much. And now we've got a treat, a special treat. Amen. Thank you, Eli. Eli, you're far braver than I am. I am very impressed. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll turn our attention to a bundle of announcements that are printed in the bulletin, as well as the things tucked inside the bulletins. They'll be up on the screens for folks on Zoom, and this is all what my colleague refers to as the blah, blah, blah. But good things for us to know. We are grateful to our worship team and our volunteers this morning, Melinda on tech, Jay on camera. We've got Care serving as our usher on Zoom, and Beth Hawk, Jack Vandenberg are the greeters online. Hannah Ingebrigtsen and Stephanie Richards greeted those of you who got in the door here today. We are into our pledge campaign, getting ready to work in earnest on our budget for the upcoming year that starts in July. There is a pledge card tucked into the bulletin if you like to do that. If you like to pledge that way, you can pledge online as well. Just to get a quick snapshot of where we are, current pledges for the upcoming year are, when I checked this morning, up to $65,585. So we're on our way to next year's budget, and we've got a way to go. This is the second Sunday of our annual Strengthen the Church offering. Here in the sanctuary, if you find the envelopes that say United Church of Christ, Strengthen the Church offering, it's one of our 3 annual denominational offerings. This one goes to the United Church of Christ. So if you would like to give here, you can put your offering in that envelope. Online, there's a drop-down menu. You can choose UMC, UCC special offerings. We're coming to the end of our free online yoga offered by our church member Janine McCain, but there is still one going on today at 2, and another one going on 2 weeks from today on the 22nd at 2 p.m. We're going to have a Valentine's Day tradition, not on Valentine's Day this year, a very special version of our annual Beatles sing-along. It'll be our second one of the year, but the first one since 2020, I guess, that we've been here in the sanctuary with Kyoko playing. Next Sunday will be the last Sunday before Kyoko heads back home to Japan. So she's taking this opportunity to bring in a couple of other musicians and invite us to all sing along Beatles songs. We'll get started at 10:30, so show up early if you want to sing along that day. I do want to say thank you to all of the trustees and their helpers who were here yesterday, making things tidied up, getting some real work done here, and that was even without being able to be outside for stuff. One couple of things that they found from many years ago, we had these Chestnut Hill United Church mugs with stained glass image on them. There are apparently 4 of them left. If you would like to claim one of those, I think we probably sold them for $10. Whatever makes sense to you. We've still got greeting cards that we're selling as well. I know some of you have gotten packs of those and have sent some of them. There's also out in the tower room a card table with a bunch of kitchen things that have come from people's homes and stayed here either on purpose or on accident. We're not sure. But if you are missing a deviled eggs container, for instance, if you wonder where that got to, is here at church. So folks, you can look at those and see if anything is yours and take it back with you. And if not, they'll find new homes. Our Sci-Fi Book Club will be meeting in June, on June 7th, Tuesday evening, for a discussion of A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So you've got plenty of time to find or borrow a copy of that book and read it ahead of the book discussion. On June 12th, we will have a guest speaker for our, what is something of an annual tradition of environmental justice speakers. Adam DePaul, who is a tribal council member of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, will be bringing us the message that morning. We are still looking for folks to help on many of the roles, all of the roles that you see going on today here, the tech, camera, greeting online and in person, and serving as the usher. If you would like to find out how to do that, just let me know and we'll get you connected. Our annual congregational meeting will take place on June 26th. That's when we vote on the budget and approve a slate of congregational leaders. If you are interested in being a leader in some capacity or just serving on a committee, let me know. There's lots of things to happen. And our church council co-chairs are interested in connecting you. If you've got questions for them, for Eli Vandenberg, Eli the Elder, or for Michelle Williams, you can contact them at the church council at chestnuthillunited.org email. And our prayer request email is prayers@chestnuthillunited.org. Last couple of things, or last thing to point out inside the bulletin, if you're here in person, there's a prayer request card and an information card. They're both on the same sheet of paper. If you want information or want to let us know who you are and how to connect with you, or if you've got a prayer request you'd like to make sure pastors get, you can put that in the offering bowl later. Are there any other announcements that need to be made? That was plenty, wasn't it? Okay. So if you were here, whoops. This is what happens when I'm left on my own. I start breaking things. If you were here last week, after we celebrated Priscilla's ordination on Saturday and then installed me as senior pastor on Sunday, it was very beautiful that one of the gifts Priscilla offered on your behalf was a replica poster from a John Coltrane tour. Not that I am besotted with John Coltrane, or that, unbeknownst even to Priscilla, that tour poster is for a show that I have a live recording of, which made it extra fun. So how could I not work John Coltrane into my first sermon as the senior pastor here? Starting with the first reading. This is by the poet Ellen Bass, and it's called "During the Pandemic, I Listened to the July 26, 1965 Juan Lepin's recording of A Love Supreme. The first familiar know-them-anywhere notes bless me this savage morning. Coltrane's horn racing up and down every alley, in and out of veins and over the faces of lakes and into the heart of stones. And when he repeats a love supreme again and again, it's as though if he says it enough, he can ease that mercy down into me, into the tiny ossicular chain, the chemical rush, the spark, and my brain getting it, if even just for this 32 minutes and 48 seconds. My daughter's been sick 7 weeks with the virus. Yesterday she felt a little bored, she texted. And I grab that like a shopping cart. I load it up with hope. Make it prayer. When the day's portion of Torah is recited, someone stands by to correct mistakes. The words must vibrate precisely in the air. So I open my door to the breath of his instrument that refuses nothing, lavishing the grass, gutters and trees, concrete cars, the gopher pulling down the new lettuces. This generous sound that can mean anything, nothing, whatever you need. And isn't that God? Isn't that it? This shivering, this fall to my knees, gods do walk among us. But humans are, after all, a broken promise. And yet these humans seem to be trying to enter what? I can almost hear it. This old planet, worms passing through their passing earth through their tissue, orchids, corn, mockingbirds throwing themselves into song like there's no tomorrow in a body. He's telling me I'm alive in a beach town in California, and my daughter in a high-rise in Vancouver, my girl lying feverish on the couch she's been lying on 49 days and 49 nights, still alive. The Bible reading for this morning is from Acts. It's a short little story. It starts with very early church stories. Peter has been traveling around, and it starts in a town called Joppa. Now, in Joppa, there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. In English, both of those mean gazelle. I don't know if that's a significant plot point, but it's a great detail. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time, she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, Lydda was the town where Peter was visiting, the disciples who heard that Peter was there sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them, and when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." And she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and the widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. That's the story. Did I mention that I'm going to talk about John Coltrane again? Sorry. It was a heartwarming experience for me last fall when the news broke that they had found a long-rumored recording of a live recording of A Love Supreme. When several of you forwarded the story to me to make sure I had seen the news. You know me. You really know me. Or perhaps more ominously, I bore you to tears by talking about the saxophonist that I like to think of as the other JC. I'll take that risk. A Love Supreme live in Seattle was an amazing find because it captured a rare live performance of an album that was monumental as soon as it was released. The album was a 4-part suite that was as much a theological statement as it was a musical one. Even in the studio, Coltrane was restless with it. They recorded the whole album, just the quartet, his classic quartet. They recorded the whole thing in a single day, but they came back for a second day because Coltrane wanted to play around with adding some additional musicians, a second saxophonist, a second bassist. He never released those takes. And on the only live recording that existed prior to this Seattle one, which is the one that the poem talks about, it was just those 4 brilliant players. But in Seattle, he had extra musicians with him. There was his saxophone, of course, and he had Elvin Jones on drums, McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on the bass. But he also added the hotshot young guy Farrell saxophone as a second tenor player. He added Donald Raphael Garrett as a second bassist, and Carlos Ward on alto sax, which is kind of fun because Carlos Ward was a local Seattle guy who they just invited to sit in the day of the concert. The guy who recorded it was a friend of Coltrane's who strung up 2 microphones dangling from the ceiling, so I guess twice as many microphones as we have in the middle of our room, hooked them up to a reel-to-reel player, recorded it, and hid them in his attic for 50 years. The tapes had been rumored but never heard, so they were recently discovered and restored. And when the CD arrived in the mail, I still get CDs in the mail, like some kind of weirdo. It felt like a holy relic. My first listen went a lot like these things tend to in my house. I put it on in the living room. I was trying to be very considerate of my wife, Kathy, who was in the kitchen. And she said, when it started up, she said, "Oh, you can put that in the kitchen speakers too." So I did. And then the music started to pick up and the sound expanded. And she said, "Oh, you don't have to leave that on in the kitchen." So I took it off, but I sat in the living room for the whole blessed hour of it. The closing strain of the final movement, which is called Psalm, kind of wrapped up. There was a slight pause before the 2 bassists started to play something else and then realized that maybe it was all done. One of them is on tape saying, "Oh, is it done?" And John Coltrane says, "It better be, baby, it better be," and just starts laughing. Kathy walked out into the living room, stunned and a bit mystified, to find me with tears streaming down my cheeks. And what I like to imagine was a beatific smile on my face, but I'm sure was much messier looking than that. So she backed away slowly and left me to my moment of union with God. And then once I had collected myself and went out to the kitchen, she said, "I don't think I've ever been moved by a piece of music like that. I don't really get it. Is it the music itself, or is it the story behind it?" It's the story, isn't it? Well, how to explain that? Yes, it's both. The music doesn't exist without the story of the brilliant musician who nearly ran himself into the ground with a heroin addiction, and who might have flamed out, but managed to quit it cold turkey and burn brightly until his death, too young, of liver cancer. Love Supreme was the musical expression of gratitude for a spiritual awakening that he'd had 7 years earlier. But it wasn't just the story that did that to me. It was also the stories I'd been reading in a book of interviews. It's called Coltrane on Coltrane. I had just learned about the time he was in a packed club and realized that the ticket taker at the door hadn't had a break for hours. So he left the other 3 players just playing on the stage, walked over and said, "They'll be fine for a while," sat down and collected tickets so the guy could go find a bathroom. or the time when he walked into the back of a club to find the owner and the manager talking about how much money they'd taken in and realizing they didn't have enough to pay the band and also pay their staff for the night. The owner asked, "Who do you think could go without for a little while?" And Coltrane interrupted him and said, "You know what, I have to pay my band, but I'm good for a while. Why don't you take mine and give it to the staff?" So he was gentle and generous and curious. And with that miraculous album playing for the first time, I was shoulder to shoulder with fellow supplicants packed into a Seattle club in 1965, stitched across time to other people living under a cloud of stale cigarette smoke, ice clinking in glasses as we looked up at the microphones hanging from the ceiling, the musicians performing their alchemy underneath it all. McCoy Tyner's block chords, Elvin's powerful drumming, the two bassists figuring out how to have a dialogue between them inside a longer conversation, a hint of Coltrane's breath itself brushing my forehead from the bell of his Selmer Mark VI. So yeah, the music and the story it was, and I wept to be in the presence of a musical and spiritual genius who died 7 years before I was born. Which is maybe a bit of a strange way to reflect on a Bible story, but there you have it. I mean, let's be real, this Bible story that we heard, it's kind of a strange story in its own right, which just makes it one among many. There are a lot of meanings packed into a few short verses. And just as many questions. Like, we don't get Tabitha's voice in the story, so am I really all that far off when I imagine that her first words, this dynamo of a woman, that her first words after Peter wakes her up from being dead might have been, "Are you kidding me? I just got to sleep." I don't know. I'm fairly confident that at least one intention of the story is to say that the death-defying power of Jesus was passed along to the Jesus movement, the community of his followers. But for me at least, the resuscitation of Tabitha is the least interesting and important part of the story. Let's be honest, even if we read this as a literal resuscitation of death, from death, rather, we're reading it from a point in history of looking back, where Tabitha's body will have been returned to the soil several times over by now. Far more interesting, I think, is that even though there's a persistent assumption that disciple is a male noun, the story just starts with no fuss by saying there was a disciple named Tabitha, without any further need to editorialize on it. And it wraps up with a tossed-off line that says, "And Simon Peter stayed in town for a few days with a certain Simon who was a tanner," which means that he made himself the house guest of someone whose work made him socially suspect. This little story does big work of highlighting the powerful forms of community that the early Jesus movement created. Even more striking to me is the tenderness that Tabitha's death evokes. Her people washed her and placed her body in an upstairs room, and then they sent for the most prominent person they could think of to come and do, well, to do what exactly? The story doesn't really tell us. As far as I can tell, just to come and bear witness to a life that was well lived, which he does, Peter. He comes to see. And the widows, this is another important piece of the story that is just slipped in there. It was widows gathered around Tabitha. These were people whose status in the ancient world made them deeply, deeply vulnerable. They wanted more than anything to show off the clothing that Tabitha had made, to show their own care for her by bearing witness to the care she had offered others. The clothing that literally stitched their life and hers together. I can't help but notice that this Bible reading comes to us on Mother's Day and tells us a story about a woman who was decidedly not defined by her maternal identity. The story doesn't say anything about that one way or the other. So it doesn't, maybe we can say it doesn't force her to be a mother. Maybe it's worth just a small aside in the middle of this weird and frightening cultural and political moment to say from the pulpits to all of those whose bodies could potentially bear life, that I trust you to make decisions you need to make and would support you in doing that. And the story does not force Tabitha into motherhood, but instead eulogizes her and it revives her for her commitment to building community in which all people are cared for and all belong. That, to me, is the most powerful part of the story. Not the magic of raising someone from the dead who will again die at some point, giving another few spins around the sun, but the lasting power of building beloved community. The fabric and the stitches of the clothing she created are long unraveled, but her name, Tabitha or Dorcas, Gazelle, that graces a page of sacred text, and it graces the lips of everyone who reads it out loud. And it asks us and it invites us to think about, who do we want to be? How do we want to be remembered? It's an important question while the world seems to fall apart around us. Who will we be and how will we be remembered? What will last, if only for a while? An array of clothing made for vulnerable bodies, spirit blowing through a saxophone, and a determination to make sure that the night's workers are fairly paid. It takes a certain foolishness and temerity to believe in the good in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. But there is the story, the sacred story of Tabitha, and there are my tear-stained cheeks, and here is God's good news. Amen. This is the time of the service where we share the stuff of our lives with one another and hold one another in prayer. I will bring around the mic for folks who would like to lift anything up here, and Kara will be watching for folks online. If you put something in the chat, Kara can read it out for you, or if you raise your hand, Kara can call on you so that we'll be able to hear you and hold your prayer as well. Let's begin by singing through our sung prayer response, Nada te turbe, that is printed in the bulletin. We can sing it in Spanish and then in English. Amen. And at this time, we turn to our offerings. I don't think we have a stewardship moment, but if you can spotlight that slide, it'll hopefully show up larger on the wall for folks who are here in the sanctuary. I want to give a moment of that should be it, I think. Oh, maybe not. A spotlight on generosity. Oh, okay, it shows up on my laptop. So, there we go, great. I want to, if we can, hiding behind the Zoom people, we've got Melinda and Stephanie there who hung out in the kitchen for our workday. I mean, I'm sure they weren't just hanging out in the kitchen. They were working hard in the kitchen. I walked into it this morning. It's a drastic difference. We had our trustees and helpers here yesterday contributing by doing needed work. Our trustees chair wrote this. I thought it was worth sharing. The kitchen and janitor's closets were thoroughly decluttered, cleaned, and organized. The insulation panels on the sanctuary windows were removed and stowed for the summer. Various measurements were taken for future projects. Electrical, carpentry, and plumbing issues were troubleshot. And yes, there were donuts. So, for the many ways in which folks offer their gifts to the life of this church, we are grateful. And we will take offering at this point. I don't know that we have folks, so we'll let the offering share the bowl with the flower, share the table with the flowers. If folks have gifts they'd like to bring to the middle, you can put those in the bowl. You can put prayer requests, if you've got those, into the bowl. If you want to use a pledge card, you haven't submitted that can go in the bowl as Kyoko plays. And there are directions there for online giving for folks who are online. Amen. Thank you, Kyoko. I invite you to stand in heart or body as we sing together our response, Halle, Halle, Halle. And our closing song is God's Eye is on the Sparrow. It's on the back of the words page in the bulletin or up on the screen. I know some people are complaining that song was clearly written for tenors, but such is life. Go from this place knowing that you are stitched in community across time and across place with all who have been, with all who will come. Go forth with the foolishness and with the temerity to believe in the good and act in it. Go in peace. Amen.